California is starting to remind me of my teenager when he is in one of those moods where, you know how teenagers get when they're like, I'm going to fight you on every single point you're trying to make? Yeah, California reminds me of that. So last week, one could argue that California had a very, very bad week, from the 40 million that was pulled by the DOT to the fact that it is now facing a lawsuit. And today we're going to discuss all of that and also talk about how California has reacted. Ready? Let's go. So we're going to start with the $40 million DOT penalty that California is faced with right now for not enforcing English language proficiency. So back in August of 2025, the DOT warned 3 states that if they do not start complying with the English language proficiency requirement, they will risk losing federal funding. Those states were Washington, New Mexico, and California. Now, this all stems from the crash that happened in Florida, because those 3 states were involved in one way or another, from Washington and California improperly issuing a CDL to New Mexico not enforcing English language proficiency, despite the fact that that driver did have a roadside inspection. Now, after the DOT said that these 3 states risk losing federal funding, Washington and New Mexico took it seriously. But California, on the other hand, and that's where it reminds me of really my teenager when he is in one of those moods, they doubled down on why they will not put drivers out of service for the lack of English language proficiency. So I'm going to attach a lot here. We're going to read through this. In a letter dated September 2025, California argues that it already complies with the English language proficiency requirement by properly enforcing this requirement through its commercial driver's license procedures. More specifically, they state, California tests for required English language proficiency by conducting skills and road tests entirely in English and without the assistance of an interpreter before awarding new applicants a commercial driver's license. They then go to argue the point that while the FMCSA says that those with a lack of English language proficiency must be placed out of service, quoting, California does so through its comprehensive licensing process, which requires English language testing and mandates that all skills and road tests required to obtain a license are conducted in English without aid or assistance. But what about the lack of enforcement during roadside inspections? As we know, California has barely put anyone out of service for a lack of English language proficiency. Well, in this letter, there's a part about that as well, and we're going to read through it. The FMCSA's notice also states that data show that California is not enforcing the ELP standard during roadside inspections and is failing to place out-of-service drivers who are not in compliance. But there is no federal requirement that English language proficiency be established through roadside inspections. 391.11b2, this is the part that says that no driver will operate a commercial motor vehicle unless they're proficient in English, has not been amended to require roadside tests for English language proficiency, and the FMCSA's guidance on assessing English language proficiency do not obligate state-led agencies to conduct examinations or impose enforcement procedures during roadside inspections. Basically, California's whole argument in this letter is that there is no need for them to place drivers out of service during roadside inspections because they already comply with this rule before they even issue a CDL. That's the argument that they are trying to use. But then they go on to say, we anticipate that the latest version of the Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance's out of service criteria, including lack of English language proficiency as a basis for out-of-service status, will be incorporated in California regulations during the next annual review process. Now, after the DOT received this letter, their response was to pull $40 million in federal funding. But even after that happened, California responded that they stand behind their letter dated September 25th of 2025. Now, we're going to go back to this $40 million in federal funding in just a bit because I want to speculate a little bit. But for now, let's focus on the lawsuit. California is faced with a lawsuit coming from Florida. Washington state is also being sued. And again, this all revolves around the crash that happened in Florida, where a CDL was improperly issued by two states, Washington and California. According to Overdrive, the lawsuit stated, and I'm going to quote this, California and Washington chose to ignore CDL licensing and ELP standards to authorize illegal immigrants without proper training or the ability to read road signs to drive commercial motor vehicles. California's and Washington's decision to endanger their own citizens is reprehensible, but commercial drivers routinely cross state lines, endangering citizens of other states. Now, what does this lawsuit seek in terms of judgment? In short, they want California and Washington to cease the issuance of CDLs or permits to non-citizens who do not have legal status. Now, this is already achieved somewhat because of the non-domiciled CDL pause right now. Washington and California have both stopped issuing or renewing non-domiciled CDLs while they're auditing their systems to make sure that they can comply with the new federal rule. Now let's go back to the $40 million in funding that California lost over its lack of enforcement of English language proficiency. So what does that $40 million actually impact? Well, it's part of the Motor Carrier Safety Assistance Program funding, right? And it's actually interesting if you look at it. The program, according to the DOT, provides financial assistance to state and local law enforcement agencies to increase CMV, commercial motor vehicle related enforcement and safety activities nationwide. So that got me a little bit confused at first. Taking the money away theoretically could mean that California now has less to work with and they're not enforcing as it is, they're going to enforce less. But then again, if you're not enforcing the federal rules, why do you need the money in the first place? So that got me thinking and I started researching. Again, California is not complying with the federal requirement on the ELP situation, so why would they need the money in the first place? The question I had is the money that they receive, the federal funds that they receive, does it actually go towards enforcement of commercial motor vehicles, or could it be going somewhere else? So I started to dig. Went down a rabbit hole. Thank you to AI, specifically Grok, that I use for research. And I asked a very simple question. Where does California store the funds that it receives from the federal government for MCSAP, Motor Carrier Safety Assistance Program? Where does it store that money? Grok's answer, I'm going to quote it for you. As a state agency, CHP, California Highway Patrol, does not keep these funds in a separate MCSAP fund. Instead, they're deposited into the state treasury managed by the California State Treasurer's Office. This office handles all state revenues, including federal grants, through systems like Pooled Money Investment Account for short-term investments. CHP, the California Highway Patrol, then draws from these allocations for approved expenses. Now, my question is, what do you mean approved and who is approving them? Now, why do I bring this up? And I'm speculating here, obviously. The reason I bring it up is because I know California has a history, and California has been found to have misused federal funds in several instances. Recent cases involving federal funds intended for Medicaid and programs addressing homelessness. Now, obviously, I'm not claiming that this is what is happening here. It's just a question based on California's history and the fact that they don't have a specific area where they store those funds that they received for the enforcement of anything related to commercial motor vehicles. And the thing that really got me is the approved expenses. Who is approving them and when are they approving them, right? So I went down a rabbit hole here, as I usually do. But yeah, this is the situation with California. California continues to say that, no, we're not going to enforce it. And maybe they're going to adopt this new rule in a year from now regarding the ELP and how it's an out of service order. But yeah, guys, just wanted to update you and would love to hear your thoughts on this. Anyway, wishing you all a fantastic rest of your day. Stay safe, stay healthy, and keep learning. See you in the next video.